Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Dina Zameta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and with partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening.
Brāv is a new way for people of any age to find a solution to bullying, violence, and conflict. Listen in today to find out how to settle family, school, and workplace disputes online. Hello, I'm your guest host, Stephen Kotev, and joining us today for our program entitled Become a Virtual Judge or Have Your Case Settled on the Net Part 2 is Remi Alli of Brāv. Remi Alli is a graduate of the University of Chicago, Ann Arbor, where she earned a bachelor's in psychology in addition to her law degree. Remi also holds a master's degree in health and law policy from Loyola University Chicago School of Law. She has mediated for over 15 years, resolving thousands of cases, and is trained and certified mediator through the Supreme Court of Ohio. She's written for Forbes, Neuroscience for Kids, among others, and received the top prize in the nation for her legal writing through the American Judges Association. She's also served as a teacher of law through the Law and Leadership Institute. Welcome back to part 2 of our program, Remi.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, it's great to have you come back for part 2. And for those of our listeners who couldn't join us for part 1, do you just want to go and remind folks how Brāv works?
Sure. Brāv is a 24/7 secure online conflict resolution website, and through face-to-face video chats, messaging, email systems, and more, with a trained community member, which is a Brāv one, they're utilized as conflict managers. And basically the integration of these Brāv ones are who are trained through our e-games. They ultimately become integrated into schools, organizations, workplaces, and more, and expanding to all corners of society with them.
So our theme for this month is focused on the workplace and specifically focused on bullying, toxic and hostile work environments. And so what I was hoping you could do, Remi, is talk a little bit about what kind of problems Brāv can solve and, can they solve those type of problems?
Yes, they can. So what we are doing with Brāv is that it's essentially able to allow disputes of any and all kinds. And so what we're seeing are interest from schools, universities, religious organizations, sports, spousal disputes, sibling spats, domestic violence issues, and more. But what we're really seeing is a huge interest from HR departments all over. And what's nice is that the HRs recognize that they can adopt it as a whole in order to add more accountability, whereas people who end up resolving a dispute with us ensure that they keep their agreements through HR's overlook.
So what's happening now is that people in the workplace are seeing Brāv as a way of dealing with their problems out online and, basically using sort of similar social media technology to talk about and work out their problems. Is that right?
Yeah, you got it.
So,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to give you an example as to
that'd
how it would
be great.
work. Okay, well, in the school system, for example, I spoke earlier about accountability. So when an organization adopts Brāv as a whole, parties in dispute are more likely to reach a compromise and maintain that agreement, leading to a more peaceful coexistence. An example, when I was an educator, I remember the first time a student came up to me for help with one of her peers. Essentially, he was making inappropriate remarks while he sat next to her, and she asked me to allow her to switch seats and to never get placed in a group with him. I complied, and he actually later attempted to ask her what was wrong and just, try to interact with her in general. And she was not having it. She just did not want to have anything to do with him. The room seemed so stale, really hostile. It was really hard to kind of continue a conducive learning environment afterwards. And so I completely understood her strategy of removing herself from the situation, but I also wondered whether a brief communication might have helped her to assert herself, her boundaries, and allow him to understand where he might be at fault. And it'd be preferential to ultimately clear the air, which would have allowed for a much more conducive learning environment. So nonetheless, Brāv would have been really helpful in a situation like that if all parties were willing to give that a shot. So essentially, Brāv would have been a great choice there.
So if you would have had some way of dealing with it online and using some of the capabilities that you talked about that Brāv has, you think it would have changed sort of the dynamics and the options that you had available. Is that right?
Yes. Basically, the ability to discuss a disagreement face-to-face with another is a huge primary component of conflict resolution. That will clear the air. It enables us to feel more confident, less tense when we're with a person in which we might feel awkward around or have had a dispute. So it's really a wonderful way to kind of just facilitate communication.
Well, right, but you're talking about how important Brāv is, or how you would have liked to have that an option. But Brāv does everything, virtually, or through either the cameras that are built into laptops, or some other way that people would sort of use that similar type of Skype technology to either, because you talk about how folks can use a virtual mask if they don't want to show their face, or they can actually show their face using their built-in webcam. Is that right?
You got it. And it's what's nice about those digital masks that you're referring to, once again, that mimics your actual facial expression so that we're still able to gain that facial communication or body communications. It doesn't compromise that.
Right. So, I think what, as I was going through before, following our theme of the workplace, have you ever had a scenario where Brāv has helped people resolve problems that are, related to toxic or hostile working environments? Has Brāv helped folks like them before or in the past?
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
An employee at an accounting firm once had given us the entire story that he was going through, and he was really stressed out. In fact, he avoided work for about a week because of the situation. So he was having a problem with a coworker. He was supposed to have a project and conference which he was working on putting together with her. And basically, there's a lot of passive aggression during the project, a lot of withholding information that was a setback for him. And as a result, during a company presentation, he was really ill-prepared. And he really suspects that it was purposeful. He wasn't ready to confront her right away because he didn't have enough ample evidence. And he also wasn't ready to go to HR about it because it might seem petty and perhaps his own fault, and he was just blaming her. But what he wanted to do was still communicate effectively, and he had not been able to succeed with that in the past with her. So our employee in that particular example came to us and scheduled a time to meet with the coworker that he was having a problem with, and a Brāv one, and that became his first option prior to going to HR.
Right, and so that's where I think for folks who are listening in, they can start to see how it would work in their life. So, if you're a student, you got a little bit of an idea of the before and after, but if you're somebody who's in the workplace, so far as you're presenting it, as opposed to having to go to HR or say maybe involve the boss of the accounting firm, they can go and with the help of, I really love the term you use here, a brave one, but basically, somebody who isn't from that office, but somebody who's got some training in conflict resolution, they were able to help those two folks have a conversation. Is that how it worked?
Exactly. So what happens is essentially that brave one that has been trained through our e-games ultimately learns various ways to help view a situation without getting personally involved. So they remain neutral and basically third party so that they can listen to any and all sides of the dispute and help resolve the conflict. In our example from above with our employee in the accounting firm who used a brave one, they were able to find somebody who's also had personal experiences with workplace conflicts, but was still able to keep neutral because the brave one had been at the receiving end and at the end where he was more of an aggressor. Nonetheless, he was able to remain neutral and help resolve the conflict between him and his coworker. And the next year, they actually had to work together again. But this time, they worked. It was much more conducive for both of them. And I think he even said that the boss stated that he could see a marked improvement in their presentation style and the success of the presentation in general.
Oh, wow. Okay. So then by, having a brave one who had some experience, it sounds like they had experience with problems in the workplace, but the brave one had also had an experience where the brave one was aggressive. Is that right? Or, sort of whatever, the aggressor.
Yeah, and that's something that he understood after going through the training because he initially, the brave one had always, when he was undergoing the training, saw himself as a victim of certain disputes that he was going through. And ultimately, after going through the training, seeing a different perspective on his own personal conflict, he saw how he could be construed as the aggressor as well, which is nice. They're totally trying to understand, to get people to see a side wholly comprehensively.
And so that insight helped our folks in the accounting agency because the brave one had, in a sense, some direct experience with what both of the people in that accounting office were experiencing. Is that right?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. So it was really nice so that he could help, while not offering any sort of resolution, but he was able to give different various perspectives of the side for all to see and help them reach a resolution that they could live with.
And then that resolution was something that they really needed because, if I'm understanding this right, they were interacting with each other again and had to do work again where before they didn't want to, the person who initiated it didn't want to talk to their coworker at all.
Exactly. And what's nice is that HR is getting a lot less work because these sort of stories are, maybe perceived as petty to some, are actually are really stress-inducing. All these little issues add up, and we either tend to ignore it, or we leave and quit the job, or someone's fired, or ultimately HR has to get involved. But no longer Brave can kind of be that conduit between them and HR, the boss.
So by dealing with their problems, not only were they able to not be in an environment where they felt like it was, I don't know if they would say it was the hostility or the toxicness was 100% gone, but it was, much improved, so much improved that the boss, noticed that change, right?
Exactly. And we're not asking them to hang out at outside of work together. We're just asking them to get along at work sufficiently so that they can perform a high-level performance for the job, which is ultimately the goal of any workspace. So they were able to see a marked improvement the next year, so much so that we were told the boss had mentioned it too. And he had no knowledge that they had met up or had communicated more efficiently.
So I'd like to remind our listeners that they're listening to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk radio program with your guest host, myself, Stephen Kotev, as part of our series, our workplace series on bullying, toxic, hostile working environments. Let me see if I can sound it better. Our workplace series on bullying and toxic, hostile working environments. I am joined today by Remi Alli for part 2 of our conversation on become a virtual judge or have your case settled on the net. So can you remind us again, Remi, about the different modes of communication? I know you can do visual, either using sort of standard face-to-face via webcam or the virtual mask, but it sounded like you could use chat. Is that right? And a couple of other different ways to communicate through Brāv?
Yeah, you mentioned all of them, but for the phone uses as well. So face-to-face, video chats, chat messaging, email systems, and phone systems. Basically any way that's preferential for all of you out there. And, you get to decide what's best for you, along with if you choose video chat option, you can use a digital mask that basically mirrors your actual facial expressions.
Mm-hmm. So do you have an example of how Brāv could help somebody who is feeling bullied?
Yes. Actually, what we're also seeing is that a lot of middle school parents are writing in, telling us about their children's experiences and how they feel powerless. They said that Brāv is like the perfect example for that, where they're feeling more empowered, and they really like that idea. What happens, for example, we're seeing in the middle school stage, a lot of different social politics start appearing. Once before, when we were children, we saw each other more or less as equals. When we become preteens to teenagers, we start seeing putting these different values on different people or our peers, and that often results to different interactions that we might have or mistreatments. And so a lot of what we're seeing is people are lacking the ability to communicate effectively anymore, ironically due to the internet, tweeting, various social medias where we don't really have to utilize face-to-face communication any longer. But we're angry, where we don't know how to channel that anger, and we don't know how to communicate with one another. And so when we're interacting with each other, we're getting frustrated. And so, as I said before, since we have a lack of communication, what's happening is we're either internalizing it, and that's leading to depression or suicides, or we're externalizing that, and that's leading to the violence and the general aggression that we're seeing. So Brāv is helping also to help cultivate a communication style skill set so that they will find a better way to communicate with one another. And the example that I want to give is there were 2 students running for student government in the middle school level. One of them kind of got a little bit more zealous and started using their friends to kind of taunt the other one, either rip down the posters, tell them insulting statements like no one will ever vote for you, would move when they would try to sit with them at lunch, the general bullying tactic styles that we were seeing. And this is really affecting him, the particular student that we're referring to, particularly because he was in contention for a leadership position, and it was just making him lose a lot of focus. His parent wrote in to us, and we spoke to them about the idea of Brāv as talking as a way to communicate with the other candidate and to help reach a resolution. So they came up with their own agreement with a third party, ultimately where they decided that neither of them would use their friends in order to sabotage the other. In fact, no more sabotaging would occur. And if this was ever an issue again, then they would have to go to the teacher. If not the teacher, then the principal. Neither of them wanted to do that because they were very serious about their school and their academic work. But Brāv essentially shut down any sort of issues that they were having, and they both had a really amicable election. So they actually ended up working together as well, where they became the president, and the second one became the vice president. So that was a really nice story.
Yeah, it's a really amazing story. And what's interesting is that because it mattered so much to them, that was part of what motivated them to use Brāv was that they didn't want to get anybody else involved. They wanted to do it themselves, but they also weren't really sure how to do that, and so they reached out to Brāv for help, right?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Actually, one of their parents actually reached out initially, and then the other, but they both thought it was a great resolution because neither of them wanted to go to the teacher or principal. They thought they were mature enough, and they were, and they also wanted to ensure that it didn't affect their candidacy or their election. So they thought this would be the best way, and they didn't even bring any of their friends who were also involved. They thought they could solve this amicably, and they're able to influence both of all their friends so that they all understood that they shouldn't be sabotaging one another, and that this could be an amicable election.
Because that's what I think is also really interesting is that, you know, you were talking in a sense about how social media can make things worse. You know, they can make the problems worse. They can have people have experiences where they've got all these, an emotional response. They're angry or they feel embarrassed or shamed. And, you know, from that point, they don't have an outlet. But you can basically use the same mechanism that sort of started the problem to help fix the problem by, you know, taking advantage of the Brāv framework to help people resolve their problem.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what's nice about this, because it's an option that's just available for anybody who wants to use it. When we're seeing is a lot of pictures that are exposing or accumulating peers at school, and so social media can be a really humiliating experience for a lot of our preteens, all the way to full-fledged adults. Also, another interesting concept is using Brāv as a way to help prevent issues such as adults taking advantage of children online. So children, so long as they're aware that Brāv is available to them, can contact Brāv and talk to a neutral third party about a situation that they're experiencing online and what they think might be an issue. So just a preventative measure just as much as it is a post-conflict resource as well.
So you talked a bit about training. Can you tell me a little bit more about what kind of training Brāv offers?
Yeah. So we use e-games, and e-games are similar to the whole idea of like, for example, like a virtual video game like a Grand Theft Auto, which has been quite popular with the kids. And what's interesting is that universities are now giving tech gaming scholarships because they see the value in gaming skill sets. So this is another added value for young people who can put their skills that they've cultivated online with us on job applications, college applications, and more. So these skill sets include the gaming hours, the conflict resolution skills that they learn, mediation skills, and more. And ultimately, these Brāv ones are undergoing various scenarios. And they have a choose-your-own-adventure style where they can choose from around 3 different responses. And based on these responses, they may or may not be successful. So they would ultimately have to complete the gaming until they are able to find success. And based on their profile.
Go ahead.
Okay, and based on their profile, which includes their age, location, personal experiences, and more, it helps to determine what's the best disputes they can help mediate. So once the user successfully completes the training, they have the option of entering into our membership algorithm database in order to find somebody who needs help managing their conflicts. And so data access and data integrity are important, and they're key to how Brāv functions. So Brav's data is basically really secure, and our video games are modified often on a regular basis so that there's always new ways to increase your skill sets if you want to learn and train more.
Well, that's really interesting. So, you know, they're put through these e-games, and, you know, they've got multiple decisions or, you know, options that they can choose. but basically they got to keep working till they get it right. Because this is how you would become a brave one. Is this right?
Exactly, and it makes sense because we learn how to essentially resolve conflicts so that all parties feel as if they are not losing out, and that there's a less of a chance for a conflict to escalate. So we want to make sure that people understand various mechanisms and techniques that are lacking today in society. So, yeah.
Well, and so with that, they can do the e-games and that training, using e-games as a form of a style of training, a form of training. They can do that, and they could sort of just take the training and stop and just say, hey, okay, I've got that. Or they could go and say, hey, I want to become a brave one, and then Brave would collect additional information about them, and that would then they would go into a database and could possibly be, asked to help in the future.
Perfect. That's exactly what that is. So yeah, it's a two-step process where anyone can train, and then anybody can help train resolve the conflicts of others, and you can do both or one or the other.
What I think is really interesting about this is that, it's taking some things that have been around for a long time and it's putting it into, sort of the most current version of technology. So, it's like, hey, here's all these different things, pieces and parts that were someplace else, and you've all put it in one place and given folks different ways of interfacing with it.
Exactly. And it's nice just to be a central system where anybody can get involved to create like an online community to help resolve conflicts of others that we've probably had to deal with in our lives. But hopefully we learn through the training to remain neutral when we help each of the parties reach an agreement.
So as we start bringing the program to a close, if folks wanted to engage with this material further, if they wanted to learn more, or they wanted to do more, what assignment for the week would you assign to them?
Yeah. So now that you know a little bit more about Brave, think about how best to have a conversation with someone that you are either having a passive or aggressive interaction with or in dispute, and just using some of our concepts that we've discussed already. And I'd love to hear from you if you could email us at info@brave.org.
Well, that was exactly my next question. Is why don't you tell folks how they can find you, Remi?
Oh, yeah. So you can contact us through our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Brave, B-R-A-V as in Victor, Move, M-O-V-E. Or you can email us at info@brav as in Victor.org. Or just check out our website and give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
And for folks who only joined us for this program and didn't join us for the last program, it's pronounced Brave, as in B-R-A-V-E, but if you're looking for it online, it's BRAV.org, right?
Yep, with the overline over the A, but you don't need to use that when you're looking for us, just BRAV.
Right. Well, this brings us to the close of our second program with you today. Any closing thoughts for us, Remi?
I had a great time with you. I hope you guys understood a little bit more about how conflict resolution is key for our mental and physical health, and I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for being on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TXConflictCoach.